This is the training for Year 5 and Year 6. I've put them together because I do see it as a 2-year process to get children to where they need to get to at the end of Year 6. The training is linked to the statutory exemplification for Year 6 and my writing exemplification for Year 5. I'm going to start off by looking at the statements in the statutory assessment framework for Year 6. I see writing as a formula. It is a formula with children learning all the different aspects of the formula that makes up writing, all the grammar and punctuation that is needed to write in an engaging manner and to hook the reader in. So they learn that from primarily between Year 1 and Year 4. In Year 5 and 6 there's a little bit of new learning, but it's about using what they have learnt so far well to produce an effective piece of writing with a good awareness of the reader. And people often say to me, there's so much grammar and punctuation they have to learn these days, and it can be a bit contrived, and why do they have to learn that? Why can't they just write Roald Dahl and Dick King-Smith? He doesn't stop and think, I'm going to put a fronted adverbial or a preposition phrase in. And that's right. These published authors, they don't do that because they have it at their fingertips already. They know what hooks a reader in. They know how to make writing engaging. They don't have to think about the formula. They just combine everything they know and put it together in a creative way. And that is what we want in Year 5 and Year 6. And that is what these statements convey. 2 or 3 years ago, it was very different. It was very much about spotting hyphens and semicolons and fronted adverbials and ticking them off and how many have they used. But it's a lot more positive now. This is the main statement: to be able to write effectively for a range of purposes and audiences, selecting language that shows good awareness of the reader. So I like to think of it as a menu. What have the children got in that menu that they can use to fulfil these statements? I'll just go through those. You've got in narratives, describe settings, characters and atmosphere. And you can see I've written there in my notes. They can use expanded noun phrases from Year 2, prepositions from Year 3. Year 4, you've got your noun phrases expanded with prepositions. Year 5, relative clauses, and so on. It's thinking, how do I describe settings, characters and atmosphere in the best possible way? And it's about using everything really well, not just shoving it in for the sake of it. Then you've got integrating dialogue. In Year 3 and 4, they learn how to punctuate dialogue. In Year 5 and 6, it's about using it well. Are they showing what a character is like, or are they moving the action on? It's about using dialogue sparingly. Then you've got select vocabulary and grammatical structures that reflect what the writing requires, doing this mostly appropriately. And that's about knowing what genre they're writing in, what the text type is, who their audience is, the purpose, and again, picking from their menu what is relevant to the writing. And then you've got use a range of devices to build cohesion, which I think is absolutely key. That begins with the conjunctions from Year 2, adverbs of time and place from Year 3, and then your pronouns and synonyms in Year 4. They all contribute to that cohesion across a piece of writing. Then coming to the basics, verb tenses are used consistently and correctly, and use the range of punctuation taught at Key Stage 2 mostly correctly. And that is about using it well to emphasise different elements for the reader and to make it more accessible for the reader. Then you've got your spelling, which does have to be pretty spot on, Year 3, 4 spellings, as well as Year 5, 6, and then legibility and joined handwriting. We mustn't forget, of course, the working towards statements, because they can't be age related at the end of Year 6 unless they do have the working towards statements too. And of course the main ones there are capital letters, full stops, question marks, commas in lists, apostrophes for contraction, all the key stage one punctuation. You know, they could be writing like J.K. Rowling, but if they're not using capital letters, full stops, they're missing basic punctuation out, then they're not age related. So, you know, for year 5 teachers, consolidating that so they go up to year 6 with the working towards statements nailed would be a very good objective, as well as starting to look at these statements. And I think when you're identifying what you'd like children to use in the writing, I think really homing in on these statements would be a lot better than a big list of grammar and punctuation. So you could say, in this piece of writing, we're particularly looking at describing settings. What could we use from our repertoire to be able to do that? And talking about repertoire, let's have a look at what that repertoire might be now. This is Appendix 2 from the National Curriculum, Vocabulary, Grammar and Punctuation. And this is what the children have learned over all the years from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4, and then adding on to that in year 5 and 6. It's so useful, this appendix. You've got the progression in word, sentence, text and punctuation. I would suggest that every teacher in school is aware of this progression and how it builds on year and then comes together in year 6 where they have to use it all. So year 1, you've got your basic full stops, capital letters. Can they write a sequence of sentences? Can they sometimes use the joining word and? Then you get to year 2, and that is a huge leap. If you have a look at that, so much of that is relevant to the end of year 6 assessment framework, isn't it? You've got your subordination and coordination, which was here as part of the cohesion. You've got expanded noun phrases, which is part of the describing settings, characters and atmosphere. You've got your different range of sentence types. That's sometimes something that goes off in year 5 and year 6. You've learned all the other grammatical functions, different parts of speech and what they can put into the writing. Yeah, but a simple question or exclamation or command can support that variety. Then you've got the tense there, which of course is there at the end of year 6 in the framework. And then there is the basic key stage 1 punctuation that we've just seen in the working towards section of the statutory assessment frameworks. So I would say, you know, if you're in year 5 or 6, keep revisiting the year 2 learning. And if anybody says, why are you looking at year 2 learning when you're a year 5 or 6 teacher? Then say, I'm not looking backwards, I am looking forwards towards the end of year 6, because they need that in the writing then to be age related. Year 3, I would say the key bit of learning from there, obviously you've got your paragraphs, which is in the working towards, and of course they have to have that cohesion across them at the end of year 6. But this is your key bit of learning from year 3 for year 5 and 6 teachers to revisit. Expressing time, place and cause using conjunctions, adverbs and prepositions. We've seen that in the assessment framework, you know, as part of cohesion, you've got your conjunctions, your adverbs of time. And that is a way of adding that extra detail for the reader to make the writing more interesting. And that a lot of that is about parts of speech as well, knowing that the word before can be used as a conjunction but can also be used as a preposition. And it's how a word is used in a sentence which dictates what part of speech it is. And working on that a lot in year 5 and 6 will both support them in the grammar test but also support them with knowing how to add that detail to their own writing and give them a better understanding of it, of the grammar and punctuation. Then you've got Introduction to Inverted Commas, which carries on in year 4. It's a year 3-4 programme of study. There you've got your noun phrases expanded with preposition phrases, which they can use to create settings, characters and atmosphere. You've got your fronted adverbials, the range of different sentence types. And then there's that appropriate choice of pronoun or noun to aid cohesion and avoid repetition, which we did see here in the statutory assessment framework. You've got the full speech punctuation, then of course you've got your apostrophes for singular and plural possession, commas after fronted adverbials. And coming to year 5, let's just talk a little bit about commas now. Commas are very tricky to understand for children. And once they get to year 5, they've learned different ways of putting them in the writing. And suddenly they're shoving them in all over the place, comma splicing when they're not needed. And actually, there aren't too many rules around commas. And I would say have a massive display up on your wall. This is when it is appropriate to use a comma. Commas in lists from year 2, which could be, it's commas to separate items in a list in year 2. But of course, as they get up into upper key stage 2, commas in a list of actions is really effective. You know, who ran out of the door, over the fence and across the road. So you've got your commas in list from year 2. In year 4, they have commas after fronted adverbials and as part of speech. And so that's only 3 different ways. And then year 5, of course, you have your commas for parenthesis. And this here, which is very clever, you know, that's knowing when you need one so that a reader isn't reading what you wanted to say incorrectly. So you know, it's a case of saying when they're editing, have a look where you've got your commas. Does it follow one of these rules? If not, then actually, would a conjunction be better or a full stop? So it's a good way of kind of reinforcing conjunctions as well. So year 5, you've got your relative clauses, which is another way of adding some detail to the noun. And then something that often happens in year 5 is that this gets missed off, the using a relative clause without the relative pronoun. So, you know, the bear who was fierce and nasty could be the bear fierce and nasty leapt at them from the forest. And that is so much more effective than a lot of who was, which was, you know, which they can do in year 5, can't they? Put a lot of relative clauses in without the relative pronoun, but also where actually they don't really need them. You know, they could be building up some really good suspense. You know, and it might be the villain appeared from nowhere. And then they're very tempted sometimes to just write the villain, who was wearing a red hat, appeared from nowhere. Totally detracts from the mood. Does it matter that he's wearing a red hat at that point? Then you've got your modal verbs, cohesion, which we've already talked about. And then you've got your parenthesis, brackets, dashes and commas. We talked about commas. Bearing in mind that at the end of year 6, if they're just adept at using parentheses, that's fine. You don't have to necessarily find evidence of all 3 kinds of parentheses. Then coming to year 6, all of that, you know, all those key points, and then they are just adding on to those with the passive, the subjunctive, really clever elements for cohesion, repetition of a word or phrase, coming back to something in the 3rd paragraph that you've mentioned in the 1st paragraph. And then as far as punctuation goes, semicolon, colon and dash to mark the boundary between independent clauses, and the hyphen. But again, you know, teach them how to use them, tell them that it's in their repertoire and to use them effectively. I wouldn't give them a big list of criteria to use, because then you run the risk of them just shoving them in for the sake of it. And when you get to year 5 and 6, it's about developing them as writers, looking at what they've got at the fingertips, what they can use, reinforcing some elements they might have forgotten, and really thinking about writing for a reader with a very real purpose. Excuse me. So just to finish off, just remind you that there are these year 5 and year 6 assessment grids that I've put together with working towards key elements from previous year groups, working at, that is just from the year 5 curriculum, statements just from that curriculum, and then greater depth, which we're going to look at next time, and then one, excuse me, based on the year 6 assessment framework.